Welcome back to One Nation Weather, where I am sad to say that on this Thursday, September 26th of 2024, Hurricane Helene is going into major hurricane status and is looking to be a worst-case scenario, not only for its landfall locations, but also inland. I don't say that to scare you, and I'm going to break down all the details without extra hype here throughout this video, so let's go ahead and get into those weather headlines for this straightforward discussion. Headline number one, what I'm going to start with in this video is the Helene update, the final update on the current status before landfall, projected cone and warnings from the National Hurricane Center. After that brief discussion, I want to jump right into the full impact timeline from landfall to inland effects on Helene. That will include the heaviest rain and wind locations where we could see 60+ mile per hour wind gusts and over a half foot of rain moving well inland. Yeah, that could even go through the Appalachians and into some parts of the Ohio Valley. The continuing impacts of Helene will also be felt this weekend further north, so I have all the details on this video. Make sure you're using the timestamps that are down in the description and along the timeline of this video below. Those will certainly help you better navigate this video as I go through it, but I want to go ahead and get right into what I discussed for that first headline to be. That is the latest cone and strength forecast from the National Hurricane Center as of the 5 p.m. Eastern Time advisory on this storm, and it is a Category 3 storm as of when I'm filming this, probably going to get upgraded to around that 130 mile per hour threshold by the time we get this storm to make landfall in the Big Bend of Florida. It has 125 mile per hour sustained winds, much higher gusts, and the minimum pressure is 950 millibars. Notice those grays, kind of those blackish shades moving around the center of that storm. You can also see the eye there. That is really on this infrared imagery indicating very cold cloud tops, and that means that these storms are really accelerating high up into the atmosphere with their growth. We're also seeing the storm speed up in terms of its movement as it makes its way towards this coastline. So from places like Apalachicola, Florida, over to Perry as well, and in places in between, we're going to continue to see impacts increase as we go throughout this evening. Also throughout the entirety of much of north central Florida, watching the heavy rain and the gusty winds of at least tropical storm force. Here we go with the cone from the National Hurricane Center. By the time we go into our Friday, September 27th, around 2 a.m., the Hurricane Center at least projecting that this storm, as it makes its way into south central Georgia, near Albany, Georgia, could still have around 100 to 105 mile per hour sustained winds with even higher gusts, making its way up through Atlanta probably as a tropical storm or low-end hurricane in terms of its winds and gusts. The gusts will be very high on this entire eastern side of the storm as it makes its way up to the north. And then as we go out of Friday and kind of cycle into Saturday, here we go towards Saturday around 2 a.m., we will still be seeing a gusty depression with heavy rain and those winds up into the Ohio Valley. While on the discussion of the strength of this storm and where it is going, I think it's a good time to take a look at those latest watches and warnings as of when I am recording this video, 5 p.m. and just thereafter in Eastern Time on our Thursday. Notice those reds indicating hurricane warnings, and then those blues indicating our tropical storm warnings. I've got some lines on the screen that kind of indicate where these different boundaries are for these alerts. Through the central Florida panhandle, moving into the far northwestern peninsula, that is where we have the red hurricane warning in effect. That includes places like Perry, Florida, Tallahassee, going on up there into southwest Georgia, into the Albany area, and almost as far north as Atlanta, we have the hurricane warnings, where at least hurricane sustained winds could be occurring as this makes its way inland. And then in any of those blue areas as far west as Alabama, as far north as the North Carolina-Tennessee line, and as far east as that South Carolina-North Carolina border, we do have tropical storm warnings in effect for at least some sustained winds or some pretty close gusts to that tropical storm force that are expected in the next 24 to 36 hours. Winds will also persist inland from there, where we already have wind advisories and some high wind warnings that just aren't shown here. Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, some of those states involved in those alerts. All right, the cone, the warning, that kind of overview is now over, and I want to go ahead and get right into the timeline for what you can expect throughout the duration of this storm, whether you live in Florida, into Alabama, Georgia, the Carolinas, even further inland there into the southern Appalachians, and into some parts of the Ohio Valley. I've got you the details right now on what you can expect in terms of the timing for when the storm is going to make its way in. And you can see as we go throughout this evening, it looks like sometime around 8, 9, 10 p.m. here on our Thursday evening in Eastern Time, we are going to see Category 3 going on Category 4 strength. Hurricane Helene making that landfall between Apalachicola and Perry, Florida's coastlines. Could be even as far east here as between Perry and the Cedar Key region. Could be as far west technically as around Port St. Joe, but overall it is looking more locked in that we are going to see that landfall in this general vicinity here. Notice the very heavy rain expanding all across this landfall vicinity, but also as far into Georgia as places like Atlanta, where we're already dealing with some flood alerts here. This entire expanse that I have circled on screen right now, really looking out for that flood threat as this storm continues to make its landfall into our Thursday evening. We'll also be watching some of those tornadic bands, particularly on the east side of the center. If landfall doesn't occur by around 8, 9, 10 p.m. into that central time frame here, we're certainly going to be noticing it by around 11 p.m. Central Time. Sometime around 11 Central, 12 Eastern, we're probably going to have that center onshore here, maybe directly over a place like Perry, Florida, with the very heavy rain and those hurricane force winds surrounding it. Some of those hurricane gusts could certainly get very close to Jacksonville here as we go into the middle of the night tonight. Very heavy rain expanding over a lot of the southeast, including pretty much all of Georgia. We're going to be seeing a lot of South Carolina, particularly the western parts of the state, picking up on those heavy downpours. And of course, some of those bands coming right off the Atlantic Ocean here on the east side, those will bring those gustier winds and the potential for those supercell bands where we could have some isolated tornadoes getting in the mix. Don't rule that threat out if you live over here. Really, anywhere from central Florida up there to the Carolinas tonight, we could see some of those tornadic bands. If you're in Florida, they'll probably be moving south to north. If you're over there into Georgia and the Carolinas, more like southeast to northwest. Speaking of moving from the southeast to the northwest, let's go ahead and kind of track some of the movement of this storm. It will be moving more in that south to north motion with that eye as we go into the overnight. This is as we go towards 2 Central, 3 Eastern time into our Friday morning. Look at this heavy band of rain, and we're probably going to see some hurricane force winds in isolated fashion in this zone that has some of those hurricane warnings up. Marisis, I hope I pronounced that right there in Georgia, Macon, back down over here to Douglas and over to Statesboro. That eye, or what's left of it, probably coming overhead sometime overnight tonight with the heavy rain, the blasting wind. We're definitely going to see some concerning damage from these trees coming down, power lines out, all those kinds of things. This is definitely something you want to treat very seriously, even here into central Georgia. Very heavy downpours pushing up into North Georgia, parts of the upstate of South Carolina, western North Carolina, eastern Tennessee, southeastern parts of Kentucky by this point, where some flooding will definitely already be getting going, and it could be catastrophic in some of those foothills of the Appalachian Mountains especially. Here we go into 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the Friday morning time frame. Now it's looking like it'll pick up in Atlanta as that center moves somewhere nearby. Asheville, Hendersonville, Greenville there in the western Carolinas, over to Charlotte as well. This general zone probably feeling the worst impacts from the wind and rain, and of course we'll also be watching the tornado threat here on the southeast side of the storm into that Friday morning sunrise-ish time frame. From there, the storm is definitely going to be expanding a little bit more here across a lot of the region into the Ohio Valley, into some parts of the mid-Atlantic as well. Two main areas I want to focus on. Number one is just all that heavy rain you see over there from eastern Missouri and as far to the west as places like Little Rock, Arkansas, through Memphis, Tennessee, over to Nashville, Louisville, Kentucky, Bowling Green, the eastern parts of Kentucky near Pikeville. We've got Cincinnati, Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, Parkersburg, West Virginia, all of that. We've got very heavy rain. We'll probably see some at least scattered flash flooding and some river flooding throughout these areas, heading out of our Friday into our Saturday as well, with the persisting river flooding, of course, as a result of this rain. And then also notice over here in the mid-Atlantic, we've got some of these bands. These could certainly produce some tornadoes while moving from south to north very rapidly throughout our late Friday morning, heading into the afternoon and evening. Notice those kind of breaking up by the time they get towards Washington, D.C., and overall the low as a whole kind of spinning out as we go into the weekend, but we'll still have some rain around going into Saturday. Now discussing some of those specific impacts the storm has to offer. Notice where this peak storm surge is expected to be right there in that Big Bend of Florida, from around the Suwannee River, curling all the way on over there towards Apalachicola. At least 10 plus feet of surge, some spots 15 to 20 feet above normal ground levels. Some of those first rows of houses, buildings, definitely going to have a lot of water, infiltrating those lower floors and vicinities there in those areas. So again, I hope everybody has heeded the evacuation orders and any orders from local officials in these zones, because obviously, as I'm filming this video, it is too late, basically, to make any preparations or get out, as the storm is pretty much imminent. So I want to go ahead and discuss some of the winds, not only here, but also inland. Alright, starting out here right around and right after here when I'm posting this video, it's a little hard to see all of the peninsula of Florida, but overall 40, 50, some 60 mile per hour gusts. Definitely those tropical storm force caliber gusts moving across this region as we've gone throughout our Thursday. Things will continue to get better from south to north, from places like Miami and northward to Orlando as we go throughout this evening in terms of those wind gusts. But where things are going to pick up is going to be right there in that landfall vicinity. This model does a great job of showing that by the time we go to around the middle of the evening, heading in towards our midnight time frame tonight, this is 12 Eastern, 11 Central time into our Thursday evening and Friday early morning. You can see that we're going to have that pocket of some of these 80 to 115 plus mile per hour wind gusts coming onshore here into the northern part of the peninsula of Florida, the eastern and central parts of the panhandle, as well as into far southern Georgia. Yes, Jacksonville, Florida, you could get in addition to places like Tallahassee and other areas on some of those tropical storm to even low-end hurricane force wind gusts, so be prepared for that. Here we go, playing things out from this point. Notice the wind field's actually going to continue to expand a little bit while it weakens down as we go into our Friday early morning around the sunrise time frame. Let's pause it here around 7 a.m. Friday. Notice after some of those 60-plus mile per hour wind gusts move through southern Georgia and some parts of the low country of South Carolina, we will continue to note 60-plus mile per hour wind gusts moving through Atlanta, up here to Columbia, South Carolina, up to Charlotte, North Carolina, points in between. We definitely still have a wind field of high-end tropical storm force wind gusts pushing up there against these southern Appalachians. In addition to all the heavy rainfall, I guarantee you this is going to be knocking down a bunch of trees. We're going to see some power line damage, some possibly numerous power outages in these locations, even in addition to those landfall sites. The wind does not even stop here. We've got high wind warnings and some wind advisories into a lot of the Tennessee Valley, the Ohio Valley, parts of the Appalachians, and as far west, I believe, as southeast Missouri. Let's go ahead and get this model back on the setting I want. Here we go. We can play things out. Going into our Friday afternoon, look at this. Going out of the noontime to around 1, 2 p.m., we're probably going to see some 40-plus to even 50-plus mile per hour wind gusts move out of western parts of the state of Virginia and the state of West Virginia. I know that's a little confusing to say. Out here into parts of Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana, some of these gusts coming from the east moving towards the west as the low will be already kind of centering around here and kind of bringing the flow like this. They'll definitely be on that higher end, and we could even see some isolated power outages from these gusts here, as we might even see some high wind warnings get included into more of these zones. 40-plus mile per hour gusts will also be making their way around here on that far western side into some areas up there of southeast Missouri, into Arkansas and northern Mississippi. The winds will begin to die down, but only gradually as the storm kind of spins around late Friday heading into early Saturday. Notice by the time we go through our Saturday, most of the day only with some 20 mile per hour gusts across a lot of the region. Rainfall is also going to be a huge concern from the landfall site moving further inland. Look at this model. It does a great job. It is that HRRR model once again. I think it hits the nail on the head with these rain totals. Most spots, any of those yellows and oranges, indicating around 2 to 4 inches of rain. Some of those reddish spots closer to that 4 to 6 inch mark. And then some of those maroon shades making up that you can see them there. I'm going to circle them here into the southern Appalachians. Right on those foothills and right up against kind of that embankment, we could have some 6+ inch totals, maybe getting even closer to a foot of additional rain on top of what's already been falling from a front. Very concerned about that. Don't underestimate any of these totals here across this general zone, though, because we're going to continue to see flooding expand with these 3+ inch totals, and that could go as far west as into western Kentucky and western Tennessee, heading out of Friday and into early Saturday. Just to kind of recap that, here's the GFS model with its solution. There you go. You can see it moving right on up there through Georgia and the Carolinas. Some heavy rain in the Ohio Valley. That'll end mostly by Saturday, but still some scattered showers and storms into our Saturday afternoon in that general zone. Then things move over towards the mid-Atlantic, again into our late Sunday with some scattered showers around this remnant low. Most of the southeast and just eastern U.S. on the very limited side in terms of precip from this low, though, as we go out of the weekend and into the start of next week. That will continue to be the trend going into the Monday time frame as well. So that is all the details I have for you in this video. Other than the tornado risk, you can see if you are in the yellow or orange zones on screen, you are highlighted in some isolated or scattered threat for tropical tornadoes from the storm. Main reason I didn't really show this graphic earlier on is just because the winds, I think, are going to overall outcompete the threat of some of those isolated tornadoes, but still, be prepared. We could see a stronger tornado or two moving out of Florida into Georgia and the Carolinas as we go through the next 12 to 24 hours. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you are checking out WeatherBell for their free trial if you want model maps like some of the ones I used in my video here. That being said, though, all I want is your safety during this storm. I hope this video helped you out, and if it did, I would love if you would hit that subscribe button, hit the like button on this video as well to help the outreach to more people. To every single one of you who's being impacted by this storm or has a property that is in the line of the storm, I pray that you and your belongings stay safe. That is it for this video. I will catch you in the next update, probably sometime around Sunday.